Ready to go? All right. Hi, this is Marshall Conley. I'm a consultant with the Geneseo Public Library. Today is July 18th, 2018, and I'm at the Geneseo Public Library with Jerry Myhre. And so thanks for sitting down with us today. First off, we're going to talk a little bit about your biography. So when and where were you born?
In Cheyenne, North Dakota. It's right in the middle of the state.
Mm-hmm. And what year?
61. Who graduated.
Oh, you graduated from high school in 61?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what year were you born?
In 1942,
1940.
December.
Okay. And who were your parents, and what did they do for a living?
They were farmers. My dad was a farmer, cat rancher, I guess, also. My mother is a housewife. Grew up at a farm also nearby.
Okay. And did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I got a younger brother, a couple years younger. He's farming the farm now, and a younger sister, sister, and she's a school teacher, basically mostly a housewife. Married to a military pharmacist, actually, Navy.
A military pharmacist?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So, so that's one connection. Did your siblings or your father or anybody else in your family serve in the military as well?
My dad was not. The war ended too soon, I guess, World War II.
Okay.
An uncle, a couple of cousins and an uncle served in Pacific.
Okay, in Pacific in World War II?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. He built runways as he approached across the ocean, or they cleared out jungles for more airplanes and went on the sea.
Nice. Okay. And then, so you mentioned you graduated from high school in 1961.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you join the military right after that, or what did you do?
Went to college, and I went to enrolled in ROTC.
Okay.
And I knew already wanted to fly, and that was my avenue of getting into flight training.
Okay.
I graduated just DMO, DMG, I guess, Distinguished Military Graduate. And from there, I got a regular commission right out of college. So.
Okay. Where'd you go to college?
University of North Dakota.
Okay. And then the commission right out of college. So, in the Air Force or
Air Force?
Air Force.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you joined. So good transition. Talk about your early days in service. So you joined the Air Force. You were commissioned, and so you said earlier that ROTC was your direct path. You wanted to fly. So what motivated, what interested you about being a pilot and wanting to do that?
I used to hear an airplane go overhead on the farm and run outside, and it's generally northwest orient because you can tell by the red tail.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew a couple of friends who were crop dusting and all that kind of thing. And I knew of a fellow in my hometown that flew TWA.
Oh, okay.
It's long gone, I'm sure, by now, but so he inspired me also.
Okay. Great. And then, so when you joined, you were commissioned. Where did you go? Where did you start your training?
Pilot training began in Laredo, Texas, Laredo Air Force Base in Texas. That was 1 year. And then we were the first class of T-38s. That was pretty nice, supersonic trainers.
Oh, cool.
And let me continue
Yeah.
that. Okay,
Yeah.
then I was supposed to fly a F-4 for Vietnam, but then I had a chance to change that. So I changed it to a KC-135 because that's a Boeing 707.
Okay.
So I already knew I wanted to fly for the airline. That'd be better training. And I was in Myhre Air Force Base, Sacramento.
Okay.
From there, I flew several what we call Young Tigers. It was air refueling missions.
Mm-hmm.
The KC-135 is an air refueling airplane.
Oh, okay.
We refueled fighters and bombers. Then I was participated in several young tigers across the Pacific to take fighters over,
Mm-hmm.
and then also brought fighters back. They
Okay.
made a refueling all the way across
Sure.
the Pacific.
Okay. Wow.
And then during my second year, I guess, everybody had to was assigned to go to Vietnam, and they're
Mhm.
running out of helicopter pilots. So I got recruited to fly a Huey in Vietnam,
Oh wow.
a gunship, and
Yeah.
dealt with special operations over there in areas nobody knew we were supposed to be there.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Dropping in reconnaissance teams
Okay.
and then recovering them later when they got found.
Okay.
And then I knew I didn't want to fly helicopters much more. I was supposed to go to Panama and fly to similar operations in Panama, and
Mm.
nobody knew for sure what that was. And I elected to not pursue
Okay.
any more of that, so I swapped assignment with a guy who was going to go to Grand Forks, North Dakota, and
Mhm.
back in the KC-135. I was supposed to go to Panama, and we switched. I went
Okay.
to North Dakota, he went to Panama.
Ah, okay.
I haven't seen him since, so I don't know what it was like.
Oh my. Okay, and very cool. So that's a lot of different aircraft, and then a helicopter. I mean, what other? So I imagine there was a lot of flight training. What other kind of training or early responsibilities did you have to go through?
Well, training, well, it's a basic, for every airplane, it's generally 3 months of training,
Mhm.
KC-135 and UH-1. And then, of course, there's the helicopter. You had to go to Florida for gunnery school, counterinsurgents training in Florida at Holbrook Field. It's part of Eglin Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess other training, survival training at Fairchild Air Force Base. That was a
Okay.
week long, and I had to go to jungle survival school before I got to Vietnam,
Oh wow.
and that was interesting. Luckily, I didn't have to use my education in survival, but
Yeah. That's I did not know they had that specific of a survival training back then. So
there's different types. There's
Yeah.
jungle, there's
Yeah.
Arctic,
Okay.
winter, and then there's land
Sure.
or sea rescue, I guess, which living in rafts you get rescued.
Mhm. So as you're going through all this and thinking back to the start of your career, what was it? What was it like to adapt? I mean, what was different about being in the military versus what you were, being in college or being on the farm growing up?
Military, you're serving at the pleasure of the president, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you're serving as the pleasure of the chairman of the board of DEER, too. It's the same difference, I suppose. Well, military training, it's your uniform and so forth, all the military courtesies you have to maintain. I really enjoyed it. There was
Yeah.
a lot of camaraderie. I'm not saying I enjoyed drinking, but there was a lot of camaraderie at the bar after
Sure.
missions. Always more of a debriefing of what happened during the flight and so
Yeah.
forth. I felt very fortunate that I was based in California. It was
Mhm.
a nice Sacramento, and you could be skiing in the morning, and you could be sitting on the beach and on the coast later in the afternoon if you right time of the year. And I would have stayed in too. I really enjoyed the military. I would have stayed in, but when we come back in Vietnam, I went back to 135 and had 3 or 4 co-pilots, or excess pilots, so you all had to get training. So you spent a lot of time in a traffic pattern, touch and goes, and doing the different minimum stuff to stay qualified. Some of the guys were being reassigned to missile launch officer school. And I lived with a couple of guys in Grand Forks that I saw what they had to go through, and it's sitting in a hole waiting to turn 2 keys. So,
Oh my.
it would have been a good for my record if I wanted to go on and something else, but I just elected to go for the airline.
Sure.
And I did get interviewed with Delta, and I was put in a pool for future classes, but then the recession, early 70s, and the fuel crunch and all that happened. They were laying off people faster than hiring.
Right.
So then I just had to do something. So then I interviewed with Deere in actually was in Waterloo to be a territory manager.
Mm-hmm.
Had a farm background, so I knew something about John Deere and field work and all the rest of it. But then after a year and a half of that, I was in Moline for a sales meeting. Had a couple hours to kill before my flight. Next door was John Deere hangar. So I walked over there, and luckily the chief pilot was there, and he's an Air Force guy, so we had some camaraderie. He's a fighter pilot, Korea time. And his parting comment, I said, if you ever have an opening, let me know. I'd like to work for you. You know how that goes. Sometimes you get forgotten. A year and a half later, he called me and said, we have an opening. Would you like to come to work for us after an interview and so forth. I did, and I flew for Deere for 14 years. All jet, of course.
Okay.
That was about 14 years. Then I got tired of going to Waterloo, Iowa, twice a day. I interviewed with United Airlines, more on a lark, thinking that old guy would never hire. They hired me, so I spent 13 years with United, retired age 60 in 2002.
Wow.
And so I did all three, and I enjoyed all of them for different reasons.
Sure.
Camaraderie was a big thing in the military. In United, of course, you got the flying perks, travel, and all that. But you get to control your schedule too. You beat your schedule due to seniority, so you could kind of pick your schedule. I had to work around a lot of football games because my son played football, and the girls were involved in music and so forth. So.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great kind of sequence and kind of overview of where you started and where you ended up and how the military played into that. I want to talk a little bit more about some of your experiences in Vietnam, if that's okay. So
Sure.
You talked about the refueling planes and then and supporting the jets. Now, were you in doing that? Were you close to combat? Were you?
Our mission was dropping in teams out of country, basically,
Sure.
so I can say. And there were typically 2 Green Beret officers and probably 3 to 7 Montagnards, the local tribesmen, farmers, basically, that knew the countryside. So we'd drop a team in elsewhere, then they would get found by the North Vietnamese army, and we'd go back and pull them back out.
Okay.
So we were dealing with rescues
Sure.
constantly, and then we had two types of flying with helicopter. One was the Slick, which is more of just a transport, the team. And there was 2 of those, and there was 4 gunners on 4 helicopter gunships. And I flew the Slick first, and I felt like I was a sitting duck at the bottom of the LZ.
Oh my.
So there was an opening in the gun, so I took the gun, and at least you're moving over,
Sure.
giving cover for the operation on the ground.
Okay.
And that was interesting too, of course.
Yeah. Do you recall, I mean, you were supporting probably numerous kind of battles and campaigns at that time. Do you recall any prominent ones?
Once a week, typically, we'd be up on the Bay Matuit and points west from Bay Matuit, which is in the central highlands of Vietnam. Then we'd go back to our base in the Trang for a week, rotate back and forth. And there we train new guys on how we do things in Vietnam, and it's R&R, basically, and relax.
What was it like being over there? I mean, how long were you in country in Vietnam?
1 year.
1 year?
1 year in Vietnam. The helicopters, and I was back over there several times. We had refueling the fighters and stuff above, well out of arm's reach. But
so the helicopters, you were there for a year, and then when you were out of California, that was when you were flying the
California
missions.
came first, and tanker, then Vietnam, and I went back to Grand Force a couple of years.
Yep. Okay. Great. Thank you. And then, were you ever injured or anything like that?
Luckily not. I went through one accident and 2 other engine failures. We got it back on the ground without issues.
Okay.
And it was all close in. We had 2 miniguns, one each side, that fired 6,000 rounds a minute. It's a Gatling gun type thing. And then we had 14 rockets on the side. We had gunners for the gunners, and the pilots controlled the rockets.
Okay.
So it was, you looked each other in the eye.
Wow.
But luckily the Vietnamese never learned how to lead an airplane, like shooting ducks. You got to lead the duck, you know. And we got a lot of holes in the tail, but very few in the front.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, we had one guy in our group that got the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Oh, okay.
And lots of Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, and I got a couple of DFCs, Distinguished Flying Crosses. We didn't work for those, but this just happened. You know?
Yeah.
Jerry Fleming's he had just gotten off the mission, but a week before I got there, and there was kind of hush hush, and all of a sudden he disappeared. When you get nominated for the Medal of Honor, you're going home.
Oh well,
You know,
okay.
So I didn't get to know him very well.
Okay. And you said you had some distinguished flying crosses. Do you still have those medals?
Oh yeah.
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 Okay.
Nobody's taking them away.
And so, what was it like to live in Vietnam for a year? I mean, what were you so busy with missions and things like that,
Yeah.
or did you get to?
It was something you go on something. Well, if you don't do something, then it just really gets boring. You know?
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time training new guys coming
Yeah,
in from
yeah.
from the States,
Okay.
and up in the highlands we would fly every day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're listening for the crew out there in the woods. And they have a forward air controller above them. They could talk to them and then relay to us.
Okay.
And we had a forward air controller also that controlled us, because we did everything at treetop level.
Mhm.
You just normally can't see that far. And he would say, "Turn right 10 degrees." He knew their target, and he would say, "Start slowing up. Over the knoll, you'll see the LZ." So you slow up, and there it is, and then that's your. You know, it's really good. It's stick and rudder flying. I enjoyed it actually.
Yeah.
And the helicopter was it's a lot of moving parts and lots of problems. We had a lot of engine failures.
Oh wow.
And but it's when you switch from a fixed wing airplane to a rotary airplane,
Mm-hmm.
everything's backwards. Captain sits on the right.
Okay.
To take off, you put the nose down. Normally, you put the nose up to take off. And so you had to relearn everything. Rudders are opposite.
Okay.
So it took, most guys 10, 12 hours just to learn how to hover. So.
Yeah, I imagine. That was what surprised me. You talked about training on these supersonic jets and flying the 707. And then, oh yeah, I flew helicopters too. I was wondering about that because
They don't normally dual rate people because
Sure.
it's costly, and
Okay.
they're running out of Air Force helicopter pilots that did local base rescue, put the fire on when the airplane crashes or whatever. They nobody went back to Vietnam twice involuntarily, so they had recruiting guys from other airplanes to fill in for the mission. So.
Interesting. So of your time in Vietnam and in that wartime service, what are the things that stick out to you? What are the memories that are strongest?
Well, you've seen the movie Band of Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing happened. You're all for one, one for all attitude. A lot of good camaraderie. Many times it was over a beer or two or three after a flight and so forth. And even Vietnam, you hear about the U.S. shows. I didn't get to see any major Bob Hope ones, but some of the smaller groups came. So it reminds you of home, seeing a good-looking gal on stage, good American music, and all that stuff makes you feel good.
Okay. And what types of people did you meet? I mean, you came from North Dakota. Did you meet a kind of diverse, broad group of folks? Yeah.
Went on flight training, I guess, for all Caucasians, but during later years, several good friends were black pilots and they were good people. Vietnamese. I didn't really fly for Vietnamese. There's a guy in town you might want to talk to, Tony Simon, retired lieutenant colonel. And he had trained Vietnamese pilots that fly this, I think it's C-119, and he's got a rescue story you'd be interested in hearing about. It's on the internet if you look it up. But,
very cool. And then, so talked about kind of the friends and the camaraderie there. What did your family think when you went into the service?
I was single all those years.
Okay. What about your parents?
Oh, well, yeah. You know, like teenage parents, I'm sure they're worried that somebody's in the. But we didn't have cell phones. We didn't. We had Mars station. You go to the Mars station. Nothing to do with the planet, but you sit there until 3 o'clock in the morning. You got to open a connection with somebody in the States, and so you dial a number, and I don't know who paid all the cost. It was free.
Yeah.
And I think from San Francisco to my parents, it was a charge, some sort of long distance charge. But I did that once. It wasn't worth waiting all night to take your turn with it. But nowadays, you know, cell phone, you can talk instantaneously. Do Facebook or whatever with your kids and see them live. And, no, I didn't have any of those family issues with wives and kids and so forth. I felt fortunate that I didn't have to deal with that, you know.
Yeah. And then
I enjoyed Australia though.
Oh yeah, okay. So,
yeah, a girl I dated in San Clemente, she came from Australia, and she said, "When you get to Australia, call my friends. I'll show you a good time." And he did. They drove me all over the province or state or whatever, out to the. And I didn't want to sit around in King's Cross and drink beer for a week. That was a waste of time. Anyway, I enjoyed Australia. Great people.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, they wanted me to come back after I got out to fly for the airline.
Oh.
And I did check with them, and they required Australian citizenship to be under majors. I could fly some of the regionals, but I didn't want to give American citizenship to, you know.
Yeah. And so, okay, very cool. And so, and you referenced earlier when you got home, what year was that again when your service ended?
When I left the service?
Yeah.
Well, I was in Vietnam from most of 69, part of 68. And I left the service in 71, entered in 65.
Okay. And where's your term or your tour was up in 71 then?
Pilot training, you incur a 4-year commitment after graduation to get their monies back from training. And now I think it's 5 or 6 years. Then when I got to chopper school, I had another 4 years tacked on behind. But there were so many pilots after Vietnam, they released us early if we wanted to leave early on.
Okay, and then what was your rank at that point when you
left service captain?
Service captain.
03, yeah.
Okay.
Then I was in the reserve unit in the Quad City, sure, where you work for the Air Force Academy with high schools, and anybody wanted to go to the academy, I would be their contact. We fill out the paperwork. It's a long process to get a nomination by a senator or somebody. And you spend as much time sometimes to maybe you could tell who the guy is going to make it.
Yeah.
Any kid they didn't look for straight A students at the academy. They want average Americans.
Sure.
But if you didn't participate in team sports, you may not make it to the academy, because everything at the academy is team. You mess up, you and I will sort the same punishment, so we look out for each other. And anyway, I could just tell. I didn't tell him that so much, but my remarks would indicate this guy he's a bookworm, straight A student, good guy, but you know, you have to get through. I knew half my pilot training class was academy graduates.
Okay.
So I knew about that, and I spent one summer at the academy training to see what those what do you call the pledge? Freshmen were called plebes, I think.
Oh yeah.
I think they're plebes, whatever.
Yeah.
And to see how they take the stress of some sergeant barking in their face and all the comments they make. So that was good. And I had one kid from Rock Island, Randy Johnson, I think his name was. His dad worked for Deere. Randy Peterson.
Okay.
He worked for Deere, and he was in the health, John Deere Health, not the insurance, but just overall health of the factory and so forth. And I always asked Charlie, "What's Randy doing?" He went to the academy. I got him into the academy, and he said, "Well, we don't know for sure. I know he's in training, but we don't know what he's training on." But later on, you remember it's a stealth fighter, F-117, I think it was called. He flew that into the public view that they had introduced to the public.
Oh, wow.
He was flying that out west. He was really mad because he didn't get to fly in the combat. He got relieved to fly some other airplane in Germany instead of going to the Middle East. Anyway.
Oh, well, that's a cool story. And you started his career.
Basically.
Yeah.
He wanted to fly F-14s. First thing he said, "I want to fly an F-14." Good, that's a nice start. But he played a lot of sports and so forth.
Okay.
I knew he'd make it, and he did.
Yeah.
I think he's still in the military. I'm not sure. But.
And your last 2 years in service, you were in Grand Forks. So you were already in the States. It was when you ended your term. What was it like coming back though from your year in Vietnam?
Well, you heard the stories. Exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I was never spit on that, but I could tell. We'd fly in uniform because we get a discount from the airline, and I'm not sure that was always the right move, but you got the stairs and so forth. I did. On the way home, you could make your own path home. I went to Japan. I went to Taiwan and elsewhere, and I was over there, and I got down in Tokyo, and I said, "What am I doing here? I've been in Oriental for a year or so." So I jumped back on, and I decided to see my best friend in the Air Force at Spokane Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington. And he was the only guy that he and his wife had a banner on, "Welcome home."
Oh, wow.
Nobody else ever did that.
Oh, wow. Very good of them to do that.
It's all changed now, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and before we got in here, you and I were talking about like the honor flights and all the things that the perspective seems to have changed quite a bit. Did you? And then once you're out in '71, aside from looking for a job, were there other parts of the adjustment that were tricky, or was it easy? I mean, what was that? What was it like to be out of the military?
I thought I adapted easily back into civilian life, but I was in Sacramento, and I talked to one of my girlfriends over there before I left for Vietnam, and she said, "You were so different when you come back." Really? In what way? He says, "You were just different." She couldn't explain it, but I didn't see it. But, and that she didn't become my wife either, but that's just a. Well, she called me because her brother, he made one-star general, and he wanted to get on with United. So she called me and said, "How can Toby get an edge up on being hired with United?" And I knew right away we'd have a difficult time. But a former general in the cockpit probably wouldn't fit, especially an older guy, because you got kids flying in front of you. You start off as an engineer or as a co-pilot, and if you have a general star on your shoulder, it's not true always, but I could see. And I gave him the best I could do to help him out.
Yeah.
He never got hired, so he's obviously qualified.
Right. Okay. And then, so you mentioned your friend in Spokane, and you mentioned earlier a lot of the camaraderie and so do you still stay in touch with other folks you served with?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
A select few, but not a lot of them.
And are you part of any veterans organizations?
VFW.
VFW. And then, and we also talked before we started filming. You march in the parades and all of those.
Always want to honor guard.
Yeah.
Some of the guys in the VFW are they can't walk like they used to. And I'm not young either, but I got reasonably good health. And now your uncle, I see him he does a lot of that.
Yeah, he does that too. And then we talked a lot about your time with Deere and then with the airline. So, what would you say were lessons or things that you carried with you from your time in the service that were helpful or you could apply to, aside from obviously being able to fly a plane,
Yeah.
that you could apply to your career?
Well, sometimes, well, I was always flew with the crew.
Mm-hmm.
See, there's crew effort in everything you did. And there are some issues with fighter pilots. They've flown always by themselves, make the decisions by themselves. There's nobody sitting with you.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the guys have a tough time in the airline because they just automatically make decisions. And there's two other people there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a problem, it's a committee effort just to solve the problem, or knew who to call on the ground to get help and all that kind of stuff. Let's see, I forget about part of your question already.
Oh, just lessons or
lessons.
Things that you were helpful to you in your career, or even any part of your life.
Just getting along with everybody and
Mm-hmm.
working as a crew, solving problems. Getting a little off that topic, though, I always enjoyed the military because we have a lot of military people coming back from different Navy, Air Force,
Mm-hmm.
Marine, and so forth. And I've flown with the guys that flew for the Thunderbirds.
Oh, yeah.
One little girl, I shouldn't say little girl, young, petite woman, she flew the U-2,
Mm-hmm.
which is a spy airplane,
Yeah.
you know. And she had interesting things to talk about. And every time you flew with her, you flew with somebody new for the
Mhm.
month. Every month you get another new crew, and so you get an exchange of backgrounds. It's always interesting.
Very cool.
So
And so, you knew you wanted to fly. You seem to have a positive view of the Air Force and all that. So, has your viewpoint of the military anything changed over time, or what are your thoughts there?
I would do it over again.
Sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't do anything different. I encouraged my son Bjorn. I said, "Why don't you think about military?" And he had no use for that, but that's his choice. And I don't know if he regrets not doing military.
Any other messages you would have for for kids who see this video if they're researching a project, or anything you would say about service or the military, that lessons or important things you would want people to know?
Yeah, just you'd obviously serve your country and to thick and thin. Sometimes there's a political option, and sometimes it's diminishing the military, cutting back, and then you're doing the job of two people because they're cutting back on crew and so forth. But overall, I enjoyed it. I mean, that's true of corporations also. You go through the same stuff basically.
Right.
So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to share, or you want to make sure we record?
I'm looking forward to it. I've signed up for the honor flight,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know when I'll go. And my daughter Erica wants to be my sponsor.
Okay.
She wants to do that for her old guy. It'll be fun. I've seen some of the monuments. I've been to the Vietnam Wall, and the World War II wasn't done yet. Korea was in the process of being built.
Okay.
I remember seeing the figures.
Yeah.
And they say it's really eerie at night.
I was just going to say,
Special
go to that one at night.
and so
Yeah,
forth.
go to that one at
I'm
night.
looking forward to that.
Very cool.
And again, just sitting with a bunch of vets and sharing stories and who, what, where, why, when, all that good stuff.
Great. Well, we've talked about everything we need to talk about, and we want to thank you for your time and all of your information and stories. It was great to hear, and we'll have this, and you'll be able to see it when it's done. And we really appreciate you coming in to do this.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.